Hello and welcome to the podcast Stuck in the Middle. I am Palan and I'm delighted to have this morning two distinguished academics with us. Professor David Whitford, Vice Chancellor of the University of Cyberjaya, Cambridge trained and has immense experience in Asia. And also Professor Dr. Muhammad Salmi Sohod, a long time academic. He claims he has spent all his life in higher education and is also the former advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister Yang Ahmad Muhammad Dato Sri Wan Aziza. Welcome to Stuck in the
Thank
Middle.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Prof. David, I read your article, which was intriguing in the Star Education, I think about a week ago. It was about value added approach in education. I think one of the things you were saying is we need to move away from traditional measures to something that's more relevant in today's context. And you talked about value added approach. How do you define it, Prof?
Thank you, Tansri. The concept of value added is that we're not just measuring final outcome of education, but we're actually measuring progression of individual students as they go along through their educational journey. So it's not a new concept. It's actually probably a bit more difficult to measure, but it's also something that I think is important. An example would be that you may have a student from a good family who's gone through, maybe gone even into private education and a very good school, has actually then got into university with very good grades. And when they arrive in university, they may have reached a point where their educational capacity has reached a very high level, largely because of the input they've had up to then. You take a similar student, say from a B40 background, who's not had the same family advantage, not had the same schooling advantage. You put them into the same university setting. Sometimes they progress a lot further. They may not get to the same endpoint in terms of the outcome, but the university education has benefited them enormously by taking them on in their journey. So it's the difference between looking at just the final outcomes, whether you've got all A's and so on, and whether you've actually improved over a period of time
More
significantly.
continuous rather than just an end out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Prof. Dr. Salmi,
Yep.
I know that you have been educated in the West, but you started off your career in education academia in Asia. But I think I'm a little more Asian than you because I'm wearing the batik, which is traditional Malaysian, and you are still stuck in the colonial
Yes,
jacket.
yes.
Yeah. But having said that, Prof, what do you think your comments on a value added approach with relevance to Asia?
Yes, Tansri, I think looking at Malaysia as a country, we are truly a melting pot. We have three major traditions:
Sure.
the Chinese, the Malay, and the Nusantara, and the Indians.
Mm.
All these have become a civilization, meaning they are built on, besides strength and economics, they are also heavily invested in education. So you can see that when we started the country, we allow the vernacular schools to carry on, besides trying to do some integrated model of a national school. At the end of the day, we have developed a country that probably, to me, in general, still the best country that allows business to grow, education to flourish, as well as society that can embrace
The
differences.
diversity.
So, to me, the value added output of an education at any level is showing that we are able to exist as a country, as a community that see differences, but most importantly, Tansi, we are also promoting lifelong learning. We want that opportunity and democratization of knowledge and information being given to all. So I think if we continue to do that, we will see that the value still stand at whatever level that you have trained or you have teach the kid until the end of the life, which is the real outcome.
Sure, sure. So, in other words, you said learning is for life rather than just for a 3-year degree.
Sure.
I know in Prof. David's article, he talked about reaching full potential. I remember my Psychology 101, Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
self-actualization. And when Prof. David talked about reaching full potential, you said that value-added approach adds value to both teachers as well as the students. It was not just, the focus was not just on the student, but also on the teacher. But let's look at the student, because one of the things you said is add value to the student. Every student matters. Good teacher matters. We have to have concept of fairness, and we have to enable parents to make better decisions, because parents are part of the process in our part of the world, and it guides policy decisions. So what do you mean by adding value to the student with a value-added approach, Prof. David?
Yeah, I think the point about lifelong learning is extremely important because you carry on that sort of learning process. So when it's to do with adding value to the student, it's the fact that if you have an institution that may be a very good institution, or even some of the top institutions in the world, they largely take students who are the top students and actually therefore they actually churn out the top students as a result of that. It's quality in, is quality out is the point. But then there are students in the world that are less advantaged in both their family background, their social background, their educational background. And it's those students that measuring value added is probably the most important for. So what value added there is about taking them into any institution that is actually doing something exceptional. And when you actually look at the impact of universities, particularly in adding value, it's largely the universities that concentrate on skills outside of the pure academic. So it's about do they give them opportunity for leadership, for sports, for team working, those sort of things. That adds value significantly to those students. And that actually adds value to their academic progression as well as their personal development. So when we're looking at institutions, you may have top institutions that churn out the top results, but you might have an institution that doesn't always churn out the absolute top results, especially in our era of rankings being so important, but actually adds more value to some of the students in their institution.
To the individual.
To the individual, yes.
Right. I remember this. There's this contentious debate in the United States, particularly, Prof, where you've been also for quite a bit, and Prof, you've also been there, where they say, well, students have got to be realistic.
Yeah.
Some of the conservatives, they say students have to be realistic. If you can't get into Harvard or Stanford or Berkeley, never mind, go and get into Davis, UC Davis. And that was a huge issue, because it's about the crux of affirmation policy. Because if education is a lever to minimize inequality, to overcome the adage, some are more equal than others, then of course everybody has got to get into the right learning environment. And in that context, I always remember what President Kennedy said: if the government cannot save the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. And education is going to bring about that change. So, Prof, Dr. Salmi, just going back, and how do you think a value-added approach adds value to students in our part of the world as well?
Yeah, I think you mentioned that I spent some time in the UK, in the US, and also in Canada. Coming back to teach in Malaysia,
Yeah.
in one of the universities that was started up north, but to focus on business, economics, and management. It's called University Utara. We are among the first. we're trying at that time to do a model, a holistic model, where every student has to attend more than 6 month practical training. Everybody had to take up co-curricular. You can become, Army Reserve or Scouts or whatever. And you must also take a very important course for every student. It's called ethics. We are among the first. So holistic approach, at the same time, trying to, in a way, using the word regimented, in coming up with so-called a holistic students where focus not only on academic but also on the character building. It has some impact, but I think the continuous effort of trying to adjust the curriculum, the system of assessment with the industry became more challenging now. Jobs are mostly available those days. When you graduate, you're almost there, you get a job, but jobs are not available now. An expectation of families who have spent money because of the tradition, we have spent and, supported you. We did not get the outcome. So I think it's a continuous challenge. We have tried at some point, but we need to have more approach to solve this problem going forward.
I think thank you, Prof. I think one of the research issues that has come about, and I think it also has come about with one of your organizations, where you talk about the gaji cukup makan economy. That's an interesting one when higher education becomes an economy's risk. That's interesting. But the research out from the education sector talks about a composite dashboard. So they talk about academic and intellectual impact. You talk about employability and economic contribution, society and community impact. And of course, we talk about research, innovation, knowledge transfer, and finally, the institution sustainability and reputation, which I think Prof. David talked about ranking. So, given this context, Prof, how do you think we can bring this to reality in Malaysia?
I think it's about merging sort of different systems. It's not, value added is an important outcome in my view, but it's not the only outcome. So it's about measuring. Obviously, academic attainment is important there. The personality development of the individual student,
Sure.
the sort of contribution to society, whether they're likely to get a job, and also, I suppose, whether the education they've had is actually adding to the job, to the employability that they actually have. Because I think for some people, university education definitely adds a premium to their lifetime earnings, if we put it in that way. Others, it may not. And it's for universities now, I suppose it's for us to be starting to look at, well, who is it that we're most benefiting? Because if you go back to when I entered university, I think nearly everybody, their degree would have added value to their employability and to their lifelong earnings. That's slowly starting to diminish to an extent, and so we're seeing a difference there. So the institutions, the impact that they have sort of varies on the students, but all of those measures are important in terms of actually looking at the outcomes of education. And overall, even if you look just at value added, most institutions add value to the student in some sort of way. And if they didn't, we'd be in a bad place, sort of leading universities. But I suppose the issue on value added is how much they add. And I think in my article I mentioned that if you look at some of the systems that actually do measure input and output in terms of academic, you actually find that there are some institutions that add more value. So if you look at, say, medical education in the US, your Ivy League schools all take high scores in, and they end up turning out the highest scores. But there are a few universities in the US, which are largely state universities, where they take in medium scores and they churn out students with very high scores. Those are the universities where I think we should be looking at what they're doing and saying, what are they doing that is actually improving the outcome of their students so much that they're jumping up leagues in order to in that. So
Yeah, I think two things. One is Professor Raj Chetty from Harvard. He talked about social mobility as something very important, and he said a 4-year degree program improves lifetime earnings by 10 times. Yeah, and of course, number two is not all is measurable, easily measurable. So that's something we have to remember. Well, Prof, Dr. Salmi, I know you talk about the gaji cukup makan economy, just enough to survive, which actually creates challenges for many countries, and sometimes economists call it as a middle income trap.
Yeah.
We just get stuck there.
You see, based on this research, we found that the salary difference between a degree holder, a diploma holder, and a school leaver is only a few hundred ringgit. So if you are a school leaver and your brother has just graduated, you're not too far off from what he's getting. And worst case country, now we are studying also the gig economy. The kids with school living certificate is earning about 4,000 to 5,000 ringgit being a Grab driver, versus a brother who's doing electrical engineering can only fetch about 3,000 ringgit from best, the report that we got. It makes the parent feel that this is something that we have to think. Should your younger brother now go to the university?
Can I just interrupt, Prof?
Sure, please.
But are we missing a point? What about the quality of life between a Grab driver and somebody who works in Dell?
Yeah, but quality of life, as you were reminding us earlier, probably on the Maslow, self-actualization level, some people has left the job to become Grab driver because they don't want to be dictated. They don't want a regimented life. They choose. My point is, whatever you're doing now, I'm trying to be as realistic as I can be. Whatever you're trying to do now, does the value education that you get along the way makes you a better Grab driver? Makes you a more dedicated engineer?
Of course, yeah.
So if it does, then it shows that we have reached certain level of understanding that the value does help somebody in life.
Of course, I think just to go back to what you're saying, Prof, of course, it makes me a better person if I get that education that Prof. David talks about in the article. If I had co curricular activities, if I had a debate and I can think rationally. Basically, education is about thinking and problem solving. We can think better. I remember that I was in a Grab in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And he's a Pakistani, and he said he had a question to me, and he said, "Are you from India?" And I was a little bit concerned because, given all the problems within India and Pakistan in every sphere of life, I was a little bit nervous as well where he's going to get. And he said, "What do you speak Tamil?" I said, "Yes, I speak Tamil." And then the next thing he said was, "Oh, I have been watching this movie Maharaj on Netflix, and I think Vijay Sethupathi is a great actor." And I was wondering, my goodness, this guy is from Lahore, and he has gone into Netflix to see, and that's the kind of world that we live in today. Right. And he had the ability to communicate, which is true. But my question is, you are running a Malaysia labor market insight series. Prof is talking about value-added approach, education. But isn't the country losing value when an electric engineer, or however good a guy he is as a person, becomes a Grab driver? We don't have talent when we need the talent, but of course the talent is there, but we're just missing the talent, Prof.
Let me come back to this research. We found that, among others, the issue of underemployment is because not enough exposure to industry. Public universities, obviously, tend to limit the time spent. So they go for 3 months. That's not enough exposure. Because of that, they became reluctant to work in industry because they feel,
Not prepared.
Yeah, not prepared. But there's some good university, Tansi, I should put on record, like UTP, University Technology Petronas, made 8 months intensive internship, and they got a job well before they graduated, because it shows a lot. Because being in this environment, that there's whatever you learn in class may not be what you get in the industry, but you have to clock in, you got to work as a team, you got to deliver. You are forced to do that in a very reasonable time. That makes you well prepared and ready to go and take the challenge. So I would say some of the programs may not have enough of that
I
exposure.
knew the former Minister of Higher Education, Tan Sri Edu, also had a 2+2 during his
Yeah.
time. And I remember Prof. David writing in his article, policy decisions.
Yeah.
But then, every time we talk about that, Prof, you're an MCMC and you're a commissioner there. And, when we talk about it, let's not forget, we've also got to complete the curriculum.
You're right.
We got, because we're guided by the
MQA.
quality decisions, and we have accreditation requirements, and we need to do that. But I agree with you that industry exposure gives them a world exposure.
Yeah.
So in other words, impact has to be multidimensional,
Agree.
right? And that's one of the things that you talk about: student outcomes, knowledge creation, social and civic impact. So, Prof, going back to your article where you talk so much about teacher quality as well. So, what do you mean by teacher quality? Because most of the teachers are trained teachers anyway.
Maybe not at university level. One of the bizarre things in life is that to teach at university, you actually don't need a teaching qualification. Whereas if in primary school, high
K to
school,
12,
you have to have that qualification. So I think anybody who's been to university, you've probably experienced the range of lecturers. Some of them are dreadfully boring, to be quite honest, and you don't learn very much from them. And others are extremely inspirational and very good at putting across points. So this is the issue. The quality of teaching isn't to do with teaching, it's to how much the students learn.
Exactly.
And so it's the learning that matters. And I suppose going back to the point about, say, industry involvement and various things like that, in this day and age, as we move more and more into knowledge being extremely accessible, we're now moving to a place where the learning that is necessary for students are largely things that universities haven't traditionally taught. It's a lot of the soft skills, it's communication, it's team working, it's leadership, it's resilience, which, value added. I think when you look at students who come from certain backgrounds, they maybe do have certain more resilience. So it's, I suppose, when I'm looking at leading at a university, I'm increasingly looking at, well, what are we doing to actually develop those skills? There's a study quite a few years ago from Harvard that looked at graduate employability, and progression in career was largely related to soft skills rather than academic ability.
Absolutely.
So I think it was they quoted that 85% of career progression was related to soft skills and only 15% to the actual knowledge base that you accumulated during years. So it's those areas that are very important. And are we adding value there? So good teachers don't just add knowledge; they add that full dimension of challenging students and getting them ready for the workplace, basically.
Well, I still remember some of the great physicians and surgeons. They need to be outstanding in what they do, but their success comes largely from soft skills, how they speak to a patient.
Exactly.
And I remember this very famous movie where the surgeon says he's the world's best surgeon apparently, and he's just about to start, and he just tells this guy, "Oh, we're going to put you to sleep." And then the guy says, "Oh, don't forget to bring me back." And then the surgeon says, "Of course, absolutely. That's a promise." Okay. And they do a high five just before the anesthesia is given. So obviously, the emotional intelligence, which was a Harvard study, makes a big difference. Going back to Prof. Dr. Salmi, how do we improve teacher quality?
Right.
Given the strengths, because sometimes, people choose a job for various other reasons other than what the objective primarily was.
Specifically at the higher education, I do agree with David that university doesn't put an effort on that. I have this problem, Tan Sri, when we started the first online university, in fact, in the world, 1997. We were putting most of the content on a CD because internet connectivity is bad.
Yeah.
We have developed a learning management system, student management systems, and a campus management system with a virtual library online connected system. But the teaching is happening at the learning center as well as at home. Asking the teacher, or rather the lecturer, to be a facilitator is a challenge. I say we have put most of the content there, and you may not be needed at some point because we were doing it in India. You're not supposed to be there. Somebody has to facilitate that. But most importantly, we're doing it online. We can probably just upgrade it or add more information as we got on the go. This has been a problem because you're taking the ego of the teachers away from what the soul they're used to be. But more importantly, Tansi, now with AI, the students are gathering more information
Then the teacher.
than the teacher. What is your role? I mean, these AI tools allow you to go and get more information than the normal reading, even on online journals. The lecturers as a supervisor, especially on research, may just be a facilitator. They don't even know.
So, Prof, you said, what's your role? The role is basically to ask the right questions and to connect them with what's happening in industry, which AI, for all its progress, maybe that's the role.
Back to your earlier question, what will be the role now is to have a blend of that.
And that's the
Guidance,
training to
facilitate, and most
improve the
importantly,
teachers. Improve the teachers.
And AI does allow one more thing, Tansi. It allows mass customization. I can now look at your profile and this is what is missing. I'm fit into that. So that facilitation is important.
Yeah, one of the CEOs that I interacted with, he was a little bit disappointed a couple of years ago with all the press releases that his group marketing or PR was issuing. And all of a sudden, it dramatically improved. So the CEO said, wow, this is improved. And then his assistant said, well, now group marketing uses AI and ChatGPT. And apparently it has this ability to go and customize it to your style and your language. So the words that you commonly use is brought in, and that's what happens. So, Prof, to go back to what you were saying, so improving teacher quality is getting them to learn how to ask the questions, facilitating, etc. In this book, The New Ecology of Higher Education by George Siemens, he talks about a couple of very key ideas. He says it is to prioritize network learning over pure content delivery. So, like what you said, it's no more content delivery, like what you were saying. And he said it empowers student agency and co-creation. Co-creation. Use data and analytics. Right. And to recognize universities as complex nested ecological systems and prepare them for a post-learning model. And the University of Edinburgh had an online learning model where they brought in community and peer-to-peer learning systems. And so many of these universities today, like what Prof said, is the public universities, they have been able to bring other forms of learning into the context. So I know, Prof, you were also talking about it in your article, very much about how to prepare them for the post-learning world. So as we come to the conclusion of the podcast, but running out of time, what would your three things that you think is very critical for us to bring in a value-added approach in education?
I think the first one is that universities have to concentrate as much on the soft skills as they do on the academic learning in the future because of the AI coming in and delivering that knowledge. I suppose one of the areas that originally got me thinking about value added was I had a maths teacher when I was at high school, and there were four of us in the class that were extremely competent with maths, and he ignored us, and I went and I went and complained to him. So he used to give us some problems and tell us just to get on and solve them. So we would work at these problems, and he would never gave us any input. And I went to him one day and I said, I don't think you're being fair with us because you're not giving us time.
Enough work, yeah.
And he actually said, no, he said, the four of you are going to get outstanding grades, whatever I do with you. I'm concentrating on some of the students who aren't going to achieve that, who are C students. I want them to get Bs. And that was a good example of the individualization, as it were, of
Right.
education. So I think that's the other thing, is that we have to move away from this sort of classroom sort of approach to being able to, and with technology now, we can actually do that a lot more. So soft skills, increased in individualization, and then I suppose back to the point, we need a lot more input into our university lecturers into how to actually do that, because it's not natural, a lot of the changes that are happening. Quite frightening, some of the things for teachers to actually be encountering AI, and it's either that they're embracing it or they're totally fearful of it, and it's that balance in between. So I think that's the other thing.
So
that
you
I'm
mentioned soft skills, preparing the teachers,
and individualizing teaching.
and individualizing teaching. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, if I were to reflect and give some input towards the future of Malaysia, I think we should focus on civic education that promotes unity. That's the basic of it at every level, from preschool to even lifelong learning. Second is to allow kids to have exploratory skills, teach them exploratory skills.
absolutely. Yeah.
Then to me, you can add on languages, because I think if you speak so many languages, you are able to adapt and to network. Because coming back to your N word, is network community, and they're already in a network community, whether you realize it or not. When they flash or upload a video, they got people all over the world seeing it. We used to have pen pals.
Yeah, exactly. I remember
It
that.
takes
You
weeks
write a
to get
letter.
back
Yeah,
the return,
yeah.
but they're connected by seconds. So moving forward, the teachers, the parents, the decision makers should facilitate that. Focus on the kid with fundamental knowledge, exploratory skills, and then these kids, you don't have to teach them technology. It's their second nature to work with technology.
So you said, Prof, unity,
Yeah,
second,
exploratory
skills.
and they're already in a network. They will adapt to technology,
Get the
but we as
network.
decision makers, parents, teachers will have to play that role.
Well, thank you for taking me in time, 45 years past, to remind me of pen pals. I remember writing to someone and then they're replying, and you learn about geography and history of that country, the culture. And it's also interesting that you talked about Malaysia is truly Asia, diversity. And you also mentioned something which is very important. You said each branch comes with a huge background of civilization.
Right.
So, and therefore it's very important to understand. And Raj Chetty talked, and education is the lever. And I think one of the things that came out from that article very, very clearly is that we need to look at how we measure differently. How do we add value to the children so that they can live a productive life beyond the university? And I always remember what you said many years ago to me. Universities should not just deliver content, but they should design the learning environment.
Actually, watching the movie Three Idiots remind me about the clash of systems in an Indian society where the focus on higher education of a certain vocation. And this particular movie is about in an engineering school. You see the three kids, the output of it, one became an inventor, One became a writer, and one, I think, became a photographer. Versus the kids that really followed the path, finishing the program, went to the States, set up a company, but end up actually working for the guy who became an inventor. So I mean, if in Indian society by now feels that you have to allow kids to explore their life with the skills that they have, I think that's uh, a good baseline for us in Malaysia to allow the kids to go and get any degree actually, but that exploratory skills, that networking and fulfilling what Tansi said earlier, the self-actualization can happen all at once. But that, to me, at the end of the day, will they be a part of a community that help this country, for unity and for growth? I think that's the challenge of the day.
It's such a pleasure having you here. I think we
you.
ran a little bit beyond time, but thank you so much. And thank you for such a productive discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Tan Sri.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Terima kasih.
Yeah.
Thank you.